All right, should be live. So, usual test, just to make sure. Courtesy to you and me. Yeah. Who wants to? Who wants to be told I can't hear you and go through some kind of nonsense? So, clean it up before you start. So I'm normally doing this room because the CNPS people kicked me out of their room. Before the room even started, I was informed that the, club members, the president and such, have decided that I shouldn't be allowed to participate. And to Franklin's credit, Franklin who, um, he protested and basically told them that they're behaving just as badly as the um, conventional physics that closes all the doors and doesn't want to hear any criticisms and doesn't want to deal with any of the problems and blah, 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 blah. And so that was very good. But as I've said before, Franklin is, he's the only character I've met so far that's interactive. That's at all, even close to polite. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, um, so I just thought I'd do this room just because I went to the trouble. I didn't go for my run that I usually do, and I didn't do certain things so I could be here for this Saturday room, and they fucked me, and it's obnoxious. And what else? What can be else be said? Just demonstrates that these dissidents are fanatics, just like the conventional physics people. They're fanatics too, and they're just like all the other religious fanatics. They don't want to have to deal with the problems of their wacky theories or truth about any of these things. They just want to make up their fake stories about how physics has never done something, or the guy in the room, when I went into the room early, he was doing this religious shit and talking about how evolution can't answer why we're conscious. And it's, idiotic, that evolutionists can't. They all have opinions, they all have answers. I certainly have one. I threw it at him and he said, well, that's not what the authorities say. So he's just doing the same thing, appeal to authority. And I turned that on him and just said, well, I bet your religious views don't agree with the Pope. So therefore, you're out of luck, aren't you? Because the authorities say different than you think. But anyway, just absolute bullshit. I mean, we're conscious as a byproduct of its functionality. Obviously, reward and punishment is a really good thing to implement on organisms. And you can't really reward and punish them if they can't feel anything. They can't take anything too fucking seriously if you can't somehow, poke them in the ass. That's why we're conscious. The only reason. That's it. Just to get poked in the fucking ass. All right. So is there anything particular? I guess I could read comments, but then we're just back on the slit thing. So I guess I could do that, but I guess I should rag on David D. Hilster some more because he's the guy who did it. Okay, he's the one behind me getting booted. And so he calls himself dissident scientist, and then he does this, like, it's just egregiously excessive censorship, in the sense that I haven't done anything violent or anything in any way horrid to either him or his organization. I mean, all I've done is express some concerns that, yes, maybe you don't have enough editorial control, and that, maybe you ought to wonder about your organization if you got a bunch of creationist as members that, they don't have too much credibility. Generally speaking, they're pathetic propagandists. And you see it in some of the rhetoric of some of their members. They make these bold claims that whole entire volumes of physics books have been censored by the world government. The world government is hiding the books, and nobody can read them, the sacred knowledge books. I mean, preposterous stories that just can't possibly be true. And, and these are the kind of people he says, yeah, we'll let those people run loose. But me, who just, points out that I, yes, fundamentally disagree with not having any editorial standards for an organization. Allowing anybody to be a member is stupid. And not recognizing that your real obligation is to prove the current theory lacking. That's your first obligation. There's no point in showing up with your your proposal until first you make it understood why the other proposal is weak. Okay, and it is there's reason to change. So first you have to point out how it's all religious and wooey with its little magical forces and magical mechanisms that nobody has to account for. Very godlike. They're invisible matter. You know, lots of fairies and unicorns bouncing around in conventional physics. So first you have to point that out and point out how it's very weakly evidenced. That's your first obligation. And that they've made huge errors, just obvious errors, like the radar experiment, or the interpretation of the double and single slit experiments, thinking that it has something to do with the opening and not something to do with the surfaces, you know, that kind of thing. So let's see if there's anything in the chat. You want to rag on David? It'd be I'd be appreciate it. The little fucking putz. I mean, what a fucking hypocrite. So maybe, you know, maybe I'll do a room every Saturday just as a spite. But like I said, I really don't have any hard feelings towards Franklin. He's the one that really does the room. And he's a fair cop. He's a nice guy. And he did protest. So, you know, that needed to be done. So good on him. And men's slut is so sexy. Well, there's no evidence I'm a slut. I mean, there's some evidence that I'm sexy, but I don't, there's no evidence that I slut around. You know, so whatever, retard. Jesus. There's no video, only an icon. Oh my God, I forgot the screen share. Ooh. All right, see, those are mistakes made. Those, you know, I should have noticed that. That's pretty bogus of me. Bogus, bogus, bogus. Now it'll probably blow up or something, but all right, not terribly important to have my presence here, but you know, I guess it can't hurt. Well, it can't hurt me. And of course, the people who think I'm sexy, it doesn't hurt them too much, but for the rest of you, yeah, it's probably not a good experience. Let's see if there's any new videos in the subscription list. All right, premature baby. Yes, really cool. No, I'm just gonna live without that. It's not too much physics in Tyler's videos. I probably should just subscribe on the Amendum channel, not on the DraftScience channel. Blah 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 blah. All right, so I guess I can go through this slit experiment again, because I did realize some things. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Things that he doesn't reveal in talking about the experiment. All right, so what they're doing, this image on the top, it bothered me because you see how giant the laser beam is. And obviously the razor blades are open all that whole distance. And there's no filtering. So there's no screening of the image. And you're saying, well, why is it so linear? And it's so linear because this image is the reverse image. So what they've done is they've projected the image onto a screen. And then it's like a transparent screen, not fully transparent, but the light penetrates the screen. And then on the reverse side is where the camera is. So the camera is looking at the image that penetrates the screen. And then they've filtered that, they've cut it off. So there's only a little view window. And then they've painted the little arrows on it, the dots and stuff. So the arrows and the dots are painted on a screen that has a little line cut out of it. And that's what the camera is looking through backwards towards the laser beam. So they're not looking at a reflected image. They're looking at a transmitted image through a semi-transparent medium, just like this is. I mean, if I had a flashlight here, which I usually do, but I usually have the laser right here. But anyway, don't at the moment. But you can see, if I put a flashlight to this paper, you would see the beam go right through. So that's essentially what they've done. So that's why it's all cut so linear. So you really don't get the idea that these are really long bars. And you also don't get the roundness, all the stuff that the normal features, you don't see them because they've been wiped out. So all you're getting is this view, right? You're just getting this little slit view. So not only do we have slits going this way, but they've slitted the whole experiment this way. And it shows when the light starts getting more and more intense, because when you make the light really intense, even though it's a wide slit they're looking through, the amount of light that is getting bent starts increasing. So you're getting more and more diffraction, more spreading. And so the light starts to bulge as you start opening the slits. So I wouldn't call it deception, but clearly it changes the appearance of the pattern in kind of a significant way, because you're really not appreciating how big the laser beam spot is, which is like half. This is 5 centimeters between the dots. The laser beam is at least 2 centimeters across, at least, maybe 3. So there's really a circle as big as half of that dot space of light. So this line would have been that high. It would have been more than a centimeter up and more than a centimeter down in terms of its height if they didn't screen it. That's sort of a significant, it's something you have to appreciate when you start watching what's happening. So, yeah, so we want to get to the part where he starts to widen the gap. Oh, it's right in here. Okay, so somewhere right in here it should start happening. So we'll just wait for that little bit, and then you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So the other thing that I realized is only one of the razor blades is moving. So the razor blades aren't moving this way. It's just one blade is moving. So in that sense, you could theoretically have the razor blades with such a tiny gap that it matches the gap of the diffraction gradient. Now, it doesn't seem terribly realistic to me, but okay, let's say you can do that and you can line them up. Then you could say they're both representing the single slit pattern. Because even though the light is diverging from the first single slit, if the grating is right up against the slit, then it can't spread much because there's no traveling distance. So no distance, no spread. So, the spread needs distance to widen. So if there's very little distance between the grating and the razor blades, then there'll be very little spread. So that was another thing to understand. All right. All right, and let's understand that if the grating was by itself, the pattern would be a dot, 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 dot on both sides. So it would just be dots separated by a distance. And as you put more lines in, all you do is make the dots go further apart, but they're just dots. Now, they wouldn't be what they look like here, because obviously the amount of light going through the razor blade is much longer, okay, than is wide. So they wouldn't be dots. They would have to be stretched lines. So it's another way of being kind of deceptive, in the sense that if you use a regular laser beam at the regular without expanding it, the truth is that what the diffraction gradient does is basically project that round beam over and over and over again. And that's why the dots are round. These look round, but they're really square because they've been cut off. So squares that are very small can look kind of like circles. And that's sort of the problem here. Like I said, I'm not calling it deliberate deception, but it clearly changes the experiment. It's an important optical change in the experiment. All right, so still trying to get to it. So, okay, so this is where now the theory is that he's gone from shining the light through 2 of the little tiny lines, and now he's opening the razor blade further. So he had the razor blades open, so just the 2 lines lined up. So there's another razor blade here, and this is the one that moves. And now he's opening it up wide enough. So now there's space, line, space. So now an extra space is being created. This surface is now being revealed. So before you only had this surface, and now you have this surface. But the catch is, right, it's what happened to this surface. Was it ever in the picture? It really couldn't have been when you're doing the single slit. And because you didn't move this razor blade, this surface still isn't in the game. So you're sort of, you're stuck with this surface, and now you're starting to open this surface. And then eventually you go far enough, you'll have a perfect two slit, in terms of the only two things open will be two openings eventually. And that's where this transition takes place. So there's nothing spectacular in that observation. But what has to be understood is this is where the light intensity problem happens, because now you've just doubled the amount of light. So you can sort of understand that if I have one slit and I open another bar, then I have twice as much light, literally twice as much light goes through. So it's twice as bright. And that effect is what's being diminished by doing this thing. So the same bar still exists there, okay, the straight across bar. It's just you can't see it, because now the dots are creating the brighter pattern. So they're just brighter. So the background image is now invisible. So if you look at it, watch it, you can sort of get the idea that that's what's happening. That the only thing that really happens is the bright dots get brighter. So at certain locations, it gets brighter. And you can sort of see a little hint of it here. This is a little brighter than this dead spot. This is brighter than this dead spot. So you can sort of get the hint that if you lighten these spots, this spot, and this spot, these dark areas, these less bright areas will look very dark. So just watch the less bright areas. So maybe put a screen, right, like your fingers. Put your fingers over where the dots will be, and then just look at the little line in between and see what it does. All right, I'm doing the experiment myself. Very interesting. Yes, I'm doing the experiment myself. Okay. It got a little tiny bit fainter, but not much yet. Not much yet. Okay, it's gotten a little bit brighter. I didn't have enough covered. I had the wrong, wasn't ideally covered. But anyway, you get the drift. And you can sort of see it, that the three bright spots have a bleeding, especially two of them there. They have a lot of bleeding between the two of them. So it's not like something that went light went dark. It's just the stuff that went light went lighter. Certain places got brighter, not some places getting darker. And that's was the changes. So that was the transition from in the beginning of the experiment, the razor blades are in control. And as soon as you expose more than two of the lines, then the diffraction gradient's in control. And the diffraction gradient, no matter how many lines you cover with your beam, so you can have a beam this big, or you can have a beam this big, and you shoot it into a diffraction gradient, you'll get exactly the same pattern. It won't change the pattern at all. So it doesn't matter how big your beam is. The only thing your size of the beam will do is change the height of the bars. It won't change, and certainly it changes their it changes their shape in the sense they'll be round and bigger if you use a bigger laser beam. So the bigger your laser beam, the bigger your dots. So if he had actually not had this screen, you would see that the dots are big because his laser beam is big. So if the laser blades weren't there and he shot the big beam through the diffraction gradient, you get big dots. That's what would happen, because each set of bars is creating all the dots. All the dots are coming out of each set. Each set sends a photon, like a photon might go straight through. It might bend this much. It might bend this much. It might bend this much. It might bend that much. So each set of slits is creating, is adding to the same pattern. So each set of slits adds to exactly the same pattern. They're all going to the same place eventually over time. They all make a contribution to the dots. So it's not like the different lines, the line out here sends photons, out to the edge ones, and then the ones in the middle send photons to the middle ones or something like that. That's not what's happening. Each set of bars is projecting the exact same pattern. So anyway, so again, this doesn't disprove a single thing I was talking about or I've said. Doesn't create any unexplainable circumstance. And their own theory doesn't even include this. Doesn't explain it either. It has nothing. They can't transition between the single slit and the double slit because their mathematics changes fundamentally in transitioning between the two. They change what the variable represents. So they can't even make transition math between the two, between a single slit and a double slit. They can't diagram it because their formulas are incompatible, because they have different, the variables represent a different factor, i.e. the width of the slit in one case, how wide is the opening, and in the double slit, how thick is the impediment. Two very different things. Both directly related to how far apart the surfaces are. So again, it's a surface phenomenon. Okay. I'll have to do some of these experiments. I mean, some of them are quite doable. I was thinking I could use folded thin materials. Maybe I'll even buy a little bit of gold so I can make some gold leaf and fold it to try to get a really sharp edge. And then I can double it and triple it and see what happens. Something like that. All right. So this guy says, when are you talking about layers? When you were talking about layers, your hand didn't move at all. I'm confused. Layers. I was talking about layers. Sorry, just don't get it. This layer, that layer, this layer, and yet your hand didn't move. My hand's not in the video. It's not. I'm sorry, I'm not projecting. I don't know what you're talking about. My hand isn't in the video I'm playing. That's a guy from 1958 or something. 64, maybe 64. He has a condenser microphone on, so it sort of indicates it has to be something like 65 or later. I don't think they came up with condenser mics till then. A small mic. You say that, but you need to have your own rig to fully demonstrate your claims. I have already done some experiments. I'm just saying, I'm saying this is a dangerously changed experiment. Look how big the beam is first. I mean, it's a gigantic laser beam. They've spread it to make it big. So they're not using a little intense beam, they're using a big giant one. And we don't get to see how big it would be projected on the screen, but you can assume it's going to be a little bigger. So you already know just from two laser beam size, right? The beam almost covers two razor blades. Now, two razor blades is got to be 1.5 inches. So it's almost an inch beam at least. You can see that would be a minimum estimate would be 1 inch, a 1 inch beam. Well, you can sort of see from his thumb actually. So yeah, it's about the width of a thumb. So a little less than 1 inch maybe. Close. Now, when you project on the screen, that isn't very far away. It's only 1.5 meters or something. So it's not terribly far away. But obviously, it's going to get bigger. And what we see is we have these marks for 5 centimeters. Okay, and we know 1 inch is 2.5 centimeters or whatever it is, close to that. So projected on the screen, it should be bigger. So it could be 3 or 4 centimeters, which starts to get to be the entire bright area. So the entire bright area is, if they didn't have the slit, the screen, the viewing cut out, you would see that circle, that's a circle. So those 3 bright dots really represent the size of the laser beam. Well, they can't represent the size of the laser beam because the beam is being obstructed by the razor blade, so the beam's not going all the way through. So I have to modify that remark. Oh, the modification would be the 3 bright spots represent the central maxima of the image being projected by the laser beam, the razor blades. So the razor blades is creating a very narrow slit, and it's the central maximum of that slit is those 3 bright spots. Yeah, that's the only explanation that's viable. But anyway, the laser beam is actually, so I'm just saying, if they didn't have this cut, these would be long bars. So they'd be round ovals that would go like, you know, from this viewing angle, almost to where the dot is. I mean, they'd be that long. So almost to where the dot is, there'd be a big oval for each one of these spots, big oval. And they've cut all that out. Yeah, that's the way to say it. All right. Yeah, so I'm going to be eventually getting some better double slit stuff, you know, ones that are manufactured. But I mean, frankly, I do want to try other materials and other media to. So the problem is I did use razor blades, but my razor blades are a little bit old, so maybe I need to really clean them up, or, you know, try to take the edges off of them or something. Because I didn't get, you know, the pattern got a little bit crookedy and gets a little funky for some reason. I don't, you really want to start with something as clean as possible. I mean, you don't want to try to mess around until you first have a really good pattern. And then you can start fiddling with it, like putting electricity into it or something else to see what happens. But the point is look, the argument being made is that somehow this experiment demonstrates that that you can add a slit and you create a circumstance where the light that was previously going one place is going someplace else. Now, even if that was true, there's nothing in my argument saying or suggesting even that you don't change the pattern by just exposing the lines to the photons. So just understand the lines, like even in the diffraction gradient, they're absorbing photons. That is, they're absorbing energy. And if I'm correct that the electrons on the surface are what's creating the pattern, clearly absorbing the photons into the material would change the surface of the energy, the force potential of the electrons on the surface. So the absorption of photons has an impact. So a question would be, is also using materials that absorb photons versus materials that don't, that reflect them. So it might be interesting to make one of these things out of a highly chromed or something that reflects, something with a mirrored finish. So the central impediment would absorb no light. That would be an interesting experiment. So I'll write that down. Reflective versus absorption. So I got, can't even read that. Thickness. Okay, so we have as one of the considerations, like say if this was the slit material, these boxes, the thickness of the material It's one subject. Because we know that the thicker I make it, I can actually make it so thick that none of the light will go through. That somehow the photons don't get through just because of the thickness. So if you make a very long tunnel for the light to go through, very close together, the light won't go through. It somehow crashes into the surfaces. I think that's a fact. Pretty sure it's a fact. So that's their theory has no explanation for that. Okay, then I wrote down materials. So obviously it'd be interesting to do it with insulators, plastic versus conductors, to see if there's any charge mechanism. Do it with objects that are ferromagnetic and paramagnetic versus objects that aren't. So I used magnetism as an influence. Can you, if you use magnetic materials and you expose one side to a magnetic force, will you affect the patterning? This is an experiment you would think somebody would have done. So, but I haven't been able to find one. So if you can find experiments that show any of this, changing the thickness, changing the material, but having exactly the same width to the slit, magnetism, then in a vacuum, you'd think the vacuum one would have been done, like on the space shuttle or something. Nope, hasn't been done. As far as I know. You could do it inside of a bell jar, but they haven't done it. And you can still project it out of the bell jar, and you could have the experiment in the bell jar and project it out of the bell jar. So it seems like it should be able to be completely doable inside of a vacuum. But I see no evidence that it's ever been done inside a vacuum. And then the electric charge one, that seems fairly easy. Nope, I don't see it anywhere. I haven't seen a video doing it. So these are all really important. So then reflectiveness. Mirror finishes versus black finishes would be another very good. Does it matter that the photons are being absorbed by the single impediment? Does that energy have an effect on what the light is passing through? I would argue that it intuitively seems reasonable that it would. You're going to do the bro thing. I'll just have to block you. I'm not your bro. I can show you the way, bro. So that's not even, I don't even know what that means. Bro, dude, boy. What are you talking about, boy? You're going to show the way. You don't even, you have a generic icon. If you're going to make statements like you can do anything, then you ought to at least explain why you can't even make an icon. I know a few papers where they did that. Fine, good, fine. If you can post the links, I would appreciate it. That would be interesting. But again, papers are often very disappointing. Okay, people point you to a paper that proves something, and all they have is some wacky chart, and you don't get to see anything called evidence that the wacky chart has anything to do with anything that really happened. It's like they don't even take pictures of their experiment. So I'm not terribly interested in experiments that don't have any evidence. They just have a chart that we say this is what happened. Well, I'm not going to stop being hostile towards assholes, so fuck you. I don't bargain. We're doing the truth thing here. You either care about the truth or you don't care about the truth. You either want the right answers or you don't want the right answers. I'm clearly not the only person who will listen to this video who might find this subject interesting. If you have, a link to magnetic experiments or electric experiments or thickness experiments, they would appreciate it too. So, you're going to play some game where you're going to hold the audience hostage to my grumpiness. That would be kind of juvenile, immature. That would be kind of a dissident science kind of move. A David D. Hilster kind of action. Little childish. and such. So we'll try to kill an hour here. It's too bad that they don't do the science room live. It's not broadcast live, but at least he usually does post the video within a day or two, so that's good. It used to be sometimes it was weeks, so but yeah, it's a little irritating that you have to wait to see it, and that sucks. So I think he kicked me out of the room before they went live. I mean, before they were starting to record. So he didn't record my getting kicked out of the room, But he, like I said, he did attempt to show me the email where David makes his rationalizations and where, again, Franklin was really good about pointing out that, I haven't done anything to deserve that treatment. I mean, I haven't, I've argued, but I haven't called anybody a skanky cunt or done anything even close to behavior that would warrant some sort of draconian punishment. So I just pointed out how ironic it was in my parting speech that the dissidents would behave exactly like the authorities who are closing the door to them, the ivory tower asswipes. So let's see. I think I've exhausted this part of it. So I get, these slit experiments are probably worth. I'm probably going to start focusing on the radar experiment because the guy's actually going to do that one. But these slit experiments still have lots of stuff to fiddle with. Like I said, I have mentioned a few. If you have any other suggestions of things that should be tested for, materials, thickness, in a vacuum, magnetism, electric charge, reflective versus absorptive. What else can we think of so anyway, as this thing gets brighter, I did want to point out, you can sort of see it when he does the plain ones, I think, when he just shows plain ones. Yeah, so here you can really see what I'm talking about. So in this circumstance, they're still using the big beam of laser beam, but he's just shooting it through the diffraction gradient. But here you can see how this looks like these little things get shorter and shorter. They're not really getting any shorter. It's just the brightness illusion. The brightness is so bright that it's making the screen flare a little. So in the middle, that's the size. So if you take that middle part, that bright part, and make it round, that's the size of the laser beam. So the beam is big, and you're not seeing it, but it's so bright when it's going straight through that it's, even though the cutout they have is probably, I don't know, centimeter thick or something, it's, the light is so bright that there's enough of it being deflected by the two surfaces to create that, that extra above, making it thicker. So it's actually, the opening isn't that wide, but now there's so much photons coming through, enough of them to create a visible pattern are now being deflected as it comes towards. So again, you have to just remember the laser beam is pointing right at you. It's coming right at you in the way this was photographed. It's not a reflection off a surface. It's a transmission through a surface, and it's coming right at you through a slit. And so you can sort of see how this is a little distortive, because the real bars, these little squares that look like circles, would actually be bars. And so you'd understand how this has been finagled a little. Well, they'd actually be circles as big. Oh dear, we have to go through this again. They'd be circles as big as the laser beam with a center intensity. So that doesn't even make sense. Let's see it really does. It's really not right to do this cutting of the image, because we don't get a real idea of what this thing would look like. I'm just trying to think if there's anything limiting. No, there really isn't. So these would be long bars. But they're really supposed to go circular. But you can't, the light doesn't bend down and bend up. So, whatever light goes through has to be represented. So like I said, they've just cut off all the tops and the bottoms of these bars. So they've just cut the tops and bottoms off. It's just not, it's pretty, but it's not very illustrative of what is really happening. It gives you a very distorted view if you think this is really how it looks, when this isn't how it really looks. This is how it looks through a little tiny visor. All right, so no comments to any of this stuff. And again, there's never any response to any of the points I've raised. So nobody has any explanation for why you can have a principle like Huygens and apply it inconsistently between the two experiments. So in the single slit experiment, Huygens takes a slit and makes 2 waves for each slit. In the double slit, it only makes 1 wave for each slit. Where's the explanation of how that can be reasonably explained as possible? Where? All right, so you're going to say something stupid, then I'll just block you. Good. Okay, good. Yeah, you're fine. Goodbye. I mean, Borean Mendham is going to be outdone by quantum computing. Well, that's never going to happen, so I'm not at all afraid of the magical, we don't have to do the actual calculation computer. You're going to have to do the actual calculation, always. You can't jump to the future to get the answer. Can't do that. We'll just do all the possible answers and pick the right one by magic. Yeah. The magic will do it for us. Quantum magic will figure out, we'll do all the possible answers and it will tell us what the right answer is by quantum magic. It happens, shithead. Time theory is going to be sissied into pseudoscience. Well, whatever. It's already in a pretty foul toilet. But the truth is you're the one who's going to get pissed on forever, asswipe. Oh, God bless Donald Trump. Well, let God do that. God is an idiot, so his blessing will likely be cancer. God likes to kill things. I don't know whether you really know that or not, but it's God's favorite thing to do is to give things leprosy and kill them. It loves doing it. God just loves it. Fucking lunatics. Oh, these just little running. He's using every little cliche joke. Now he brings up Miles Mathis. Oh, yeah, it's so funny. Oh, no, it's not funny. Fucking piece of shit. Really, there's no honest intellectuals on this planet. Just cruddy humans. No integrity. They're all just bags of shit begging to get what you deserve. And I'm certainly voting for it. When it's time to vote that you get what you deserve, I'll be voting for it. So let's see how long I've been in here. I wanted to do it at least an hour, but let's see what it is. Oh, that's not what I'm looking for. Stupid freaking hide button. I really don't need that. Not very revealing of anything at all interesting. 8 viewers. That's pretty sucky. Oh, that's right. It doesn't tell me how long I've been in here. Yeah. All right. Oh, so I can read the comments. That's right. think I already dealt with the comments, but we can read them. All right. So this is like mom, whatever is mindless marbles or whatever. There is a specific reason why your suggestion that the pattern is partly created by the metal pieces fails. Okay, so you put a single slit in front of the multiple slits, and you say the single slit doesn't matter, that it starts to compress and create little bars. Okay, fine. I guess the reason is that theoretically a diffraction gradient doesn't care much. It just always moves the light to specific locations. It doesn't really care where the light comes in. It ends up going to exactly the same place. So so you have a bunch of little strings creating openings between the strings. And what happens when you have these things really close to each other is that the light from this one that goes through here and the one that goes through here, which can be kind of far apart, will end up going to exactly the same place. Not true. Said that wrong. All right. Rephrase. Inside the beam width. Everything inside the beam width will go to the same place, in the sense that the beam will essentially be transported to the new location. Now, if you use a beam that's too big, the consequences of that would be, let's see, because your beam is now bigger than the location the light wants to go to. Now, I have to think that one through, what the consequence of that is. But anyway, you can see very clear. No, there's nothing very clear, in the sense that the experiment hasn't been detailed. So we didn't get to see first that he's using a pass-through. We didn't get to see that he's cutting the image. We don't get to see what the single slit pattern looked like without the gradient in front of it, right? And we didn't get to see what the gradient looks like without the single slit in front of it. So lots of things we didn't see. So nothing was very clear. Liar. That the dark bands do not slide in from the sides. I never said they slide in from the sides. We know the single slit pattern, that's what happens. As you widen the gap, the beam gets narrower and the little lines compress. That's a fact. And instead, they only come into existence at a certain threshold. Your interpretation. I challenge anyone to go watch and see it for him or herself. I would argue the same exact thing, and do so now with recognizing that the image has been cut and you're not seeing the actual projection. If the single slit pattern of the metal pieces, the razor blades, but okay, had anything to do with the video, well, it's obviously being used to confine how much light goes to the diffraction gradient. And the fact is that at certain widths, it's going to project the light in a bar pattern. That's just a fact. Okay. Had anything to do with the video, then those bars would have gradually come from the sides. No, they wouldn't have. I'm not arguing that the dots are created by the single slit. I'm arguing the dots are created by the Rankine ruler, okay, the gradient, rather than appearing the way they did. Whatever. Also, really, I don't see the use of these time codes. You either can quote somebody or you can go fuck yourself. But I mean, this idea that I'm going to go rewatch a video just seems kind of idiotic, unless you're making some kind of really brilliant point, which you're not. You seem to doubt the length scales. No, there was never any idea that I doubted the length scale. So that's just a pile of horse shit. These actually work in the comment section now, so I can actually use these time codes and get to them from the full comment video. So now he's saying this is the double slit pattern, when clearly, well, we'll try again. Hey, but I bet you a full turn is a lot more than 1/10 of a millimeter. All right, so I'm not doubting the dots at all. I'm saying how much does the razor blade move per turn of the dial? That's all. I'm just wondering how much has he opened the razor blades? It seems like he did a lot of turning, you know, and so it seems like that would be more than one extra line. It seems like he's adding more than one extra line for the amount he turned. That's all I was saying. I'm not doubting any scale here, asshole. Fuck. All right. And I respect that. I don't know what you do, but I don't think they're impossible. I don't know what that even means. Let's see. Oh, it is your right to doubt the length scale. Well, like I said, I'm not doubting it. And I respect that, but I don't think they're impossible. A micrometer, for example, is a real tool that is supposed to measure 1/1000th of a centimeter. Oh, yeah, well, now we're getting this centimeters, decameters, millimeters. You know, I wish they used fractions or something. But anyway, 1/1000th of a centimeter is 1/100th of a millimeter. Yeah, I'm not saying they can't. I just know how accurate a measurement gets at that scale. You can probably buy one yourself and experiment with it. I don't need to. I actually have an old microscope that has a table that has a pretty good micrometer mechanism on it that I might be able to just put a razor blade on. But regardless, it really doesn't matter. I mean, all you really need to do is be able to adjust the distances. I don't need to do it incrementally to learn a lot. You do it just by tapping. All right. None of this is rocket science. Well, again, if it's not rocket science, why haven't they done all these experiments they could have done? Yeah, I agree. It's not rocket science, but clearly it's not clean science either. It's not clear-cut science, and it hasn't been done or presented in a way to expose the truth. It's been presented in a way to defend their theory. So they're not being honest to the experiment. You think Suskind's statement that you have to strain credulity to come up with mechanical explanations when their explanation is things like Huygens? So again, I'll ask you, who hasn't answered any of my questions, how is Huygens a viable explanation when you change how it functions between the two slit and the single slit? Huygens does a completely different thing in the two experiments. How is that possible? How is that possible? All right. The argument is that if you isolate the light from only one of the slits of the double slit, you will see a single slit pattern. Right. If you cover one of the slits, you have a single slit pattern. Not what Susskind drew, not really what Susskind even said. He didn't even point it out. He didn't even mention Newton's rings. Not a double slit pattern. And again, I've explained why there would be a difference, because the impediment is small, and second, it's getting hit by photons. Therefore, each slit creates a single slit pattern, and the double slit pattern is not created by the surfaces. You're saying therefore, and you're saying it based on this thin evidence. You haven't done the experiments. You haven't tried to do any of the things I've just mentioned. Change the thickness, change the material, impose magnetism, do it in a vacuum. You haven't done any of these things. And you're making a therefore statement. Like, we don't need any more information. You need more information. And your cause theory, again, is crap. Susskind, I pointed out in the video, he never explains the cause. He ridicules you for thinking there might be a mechanical cause, and his cause is it just happens. God done it. He provides zero cause. Zero. 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 What is interfering? Did you hear him say the photon turns into two wave packets that interfere with each other? Did he say anything to give you some indication of how you can have interference with a single photon? How does a single photon interfere with itself? How does it do that? Did you hear him say anything? No. All right. Therefore, not all dark bands are created at the surfaces. I'm saying the whole pattern is created by every single surface. Every single surface creates every bit of the pattern, not with one photon. Each photon does something different when it interacts with the surface. That's why a single surface creates the same pattern. Every surface is creating a contribution to the entire pattern. All right. As I linked to the timestamp above, you can see dark bands materialize. And if it were the metal piece creating them, then they would have slides showing from the sides. I don't see a time code here. So anyway, this is the original video for anyone curious. It doesn't have a time code on it. So whatever. Some notable times were at 3:20 and 3:50. In the other time, you could see a triple slit pattern materialize from another pattern. There's no triple slit pattern. You can see right from the start that as soon as the gradient starts acquiring any number of bars, those bars are creating the pattern. So it doesn't care whether there's 2 or 4. It's the tininess. It's the width of the bar. It's the width of the lines. And that's in the math, dopey. Remember the math for the double slit? The width is deciding the sine theta. The width of the impediment. It's the width of the lines that are creating the pattern. So once the single slit, the razor blades, exposes enough light and hits more than 2 lines, as soon as it does that, the pattern automatically turns into dots. Okay. And they get more detailed the more light you expose the gradient to. They get more reliable in the overall direction. The intensity of the location gets better and better. The noise is still there, but the noise becomes less and less visible. That's a fact. Okay, if this were solely due to the surface, you'd expect there to be a triple slit pattern. No, I wouldn't. Actually, you'd expect to see the full diffraction pattern. Yes, at some point you would expect it if, as you're opening the slit, that's what you're projecting onto the gradient. But again, as I pointed out, the gradient doesn't really care whether there's any on-off stuff, because it's each slit, each line has 2 surfaces, and those surfaces create the full pattern. So it really doesn't matter whether there's a few places that are missing where there's no light hitting that line. No light on that line won't change the pattern any. It'll just make it less bright. All right. Actually, you would expect to see the full diffraction pattern from the very beginning. No, you wouldn't, because if it spreads enough to cover more than one line on the Ronchi ruler, the Ronchi ruler is automatically going to shoot it to those dot locations. You don't, however. So whatever. Your argument is bullshit. Sorry, it's a bullshit argument. You want to pretend that you've proven something or demonstrated something? I say you haven't in any meaningful way at all with this experiment. All right, I think we already did this one. Yes, we did this one already. All right, so I think that's it for comments. Oh, there was one in the spam folder the other day. I tried to recover it, but failed to do so. Let's see if it's still there. It seemed like a pretty elaborate comment. It was like from a week. I never saw it, a month ago. It's bizarre. I never saw this comment. So let's see if there's any comments in the live room, which is really quite dead. The dead live people. Yes, sorry. Bovera's right. You're full of shit, mate. Well, fuck you. That's not an argument. Why don't you explain the Huygens? I give you a simple question. Why don't you explain why the pattern in photons isn't as gradual as it should be? There should be a gradual gradation from light to dark. How come it doesn't do that? Fuckhead. Oh, he's real English, I guess. Mate and bloke. So my hair is a problem. So you would doubt Einstein because his hair is messy. That's your standard, huh? Hair is important. Oh, it's such a critically important. What are you, bald? Fat and bald with your smelly little anus, and that's all you have in your life is your little smelly anus? Man, are you an asshole. Humans, they just keep providing evidence why they need to be annihilated. Disgusting creatures. Amanda may be a secret trap tranny, whatever that is, a secret trap. What's the trap, weirdo? Who is under the pay grade of the Chinese propaganda machine. So that certainly doesn't make any sense. So more evidence that humans aren't worth the fucking TNT to blow them to hell. Too fucking stupid. So these are people arguing science who are just basically demonstrating what imbeciles they are. Colossal imbeciles. Don't want the truth, don't want to know a fact, don't want to understand anything. They just want to talk shit. Amazing. It's amazing. And the sycophants, you go on to one of these like if Sufskine did a live room, they'll all just show up. You're the most magical, super brainy man I've ever seen. You're incredible. And they'd just be glowing and just every word he says, whatever fucktarded nonsense they say. Oh, I believe everything you say. Oh, it's insane. Insane. You're all just people who fall for the antics of like a Johnny Cochran or something. Ugh, disgusting. A couple of those guys got what they deserve. Dershowitz hasn't got what he deserves yet, though. He's still alive. Fucking cunts. The liars are everywhere. Anyway, so where was I? Okay. Can gravitational lensing be used to measure the gravitational field of foreground sources? Well, that's exactly the whole point of it, right? But there is no such thing, idiot. I would like to test to see if the source follows the inverse square law of gravity. Well, clearly it doesn't when it comes to photons by Einstein's new rule. So we don't have an inverse square law anymore. So gravity can go much further because it's much stronger, because it doesn't degrade as fast under the new Einstein rules, where photons are special and they don't have to obey the same. Somehow gravity changes just for the photon. Doesn't change for electrons or protons or anything else, but it changes for the photon. So the gravity actually makes more gravity just for the photons. Just for them. Special gravity. It turns on extra gravity machine so the photons can have more gravity. That's how bad their science is. That's how absolutely bad it is. That they don't even understand that the gravity is something in the space, and that the photon can't make the gravity go away or double. The photon can't do that. especially can't make it double, right? You could almost argue that it somehow could evade the gravity, but it's insane to say it can double the gravity. Like me making the light bulb double by just saying, double, hit me with twice as much light because I am a photon, but don't make more light hit the rest of the room. So only make more light that hits me. Don't make more light that hits anything else. That's how bad their physics is. My hypothesis that dark matter is not a WIMP. I forgot what that even means. Who cares? Wimps and peas and poopies. Oh, you're all like such girly men. But maybe is a deformation of space-time by which the curvature of space-time alone is the cause of the gravitational effect. Well, gee, wouldn't that, I mean, I don't want to say that's got to be like the dumbest thing written today, even though it was a month ago. But I mean, yeah, clearly curving space-time causes gravity to warp. Yeah, they've already established that. Creating waves. Warping is waves. Waves is a warp. I'm just letting you know. Gravity is the consequence of the curvature of space-time. Well, gee, did you figure that on your own, huh? All by yourself? Oh, wait a minute. No, that's exactly what Einstein's theory is. You stupid, dumb fuck. This is just so stupid. It may be possible that some structure of space-time itself could be warped without the presence of mass. So we don't need mass anymore. We just need dark stuff. And that doesn't have mass, but it creates gravity. So we have the magic gravity creating stuff. La 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 la. But none of it's around here, of course. You can't buy anywhere here. You have to go to China. Yeah. Get in person. You have to buy it on the black market in China. Space-time has been shown to react like a fabric by warping, twisting, and propagating independent of mass. Where did that happen? Where did independent of mass? Seems to me even the gravitational wave people have argued they have to destroy 3 solar masses to get the wave here. You know, they can't do it independent of mass. They have to destroy a ton of mass, convert into energy, to actually push the stupid gravity bent warp wave here. There's physics is this retarded. Yeah, something Einstein never talked about. Oh yeah, sure, you can just take matter and you can dissolve it into space, bent space. Sure, no problem. I do it all the time. These properties have been proven. So insane statement. Insanely obnoxiously grotesque use of the word proven. You say it, therefore it's proven. There's a, I found some fur on my walkway. Sasquatch is real. That's your standard of proof. It's plainly silly. All right. Space-time has been shown by warping, twisting, and propagating independent of mass. These properties have been proven with observations of gravitational lensing. So again, the observations of lensing that doesn't fit because the lens is the wrong shape. It wouldn't fit anyway, even with Einstein's fucked up pretend math. You still can't make it mathematically make sense. There's still not enough gravity in the locations where the light's being bent for the light to be bent. It mathematically doesn't work. And you have to invent things like dark matter to create lensing glue. Frame dragging and now gravitational waves. So, well, gravitational waves don't have shit all to do with bending photons. So now you're just playing games. Bent space isn't supposed to be photons. That's another news flash. Fabrics can be stretched, pressured, and heated to a point of deformation. Well, again, so you think empty space is a fabric. You think the nothing is a something. You don't think there's little electrons and protons and neutrons floating around in a sea of nothing. You think they're floating around in a sea of something, some kind of ether, right? Is that all this is about? You people just really want to just drag physics into this fucking ether goo, with this mush. Anyway, such extreme conditions were all present during inflation. Well, inflation's a pile of shit, so whatever. So it is plausible, and this is plausible, that space-time's elastic nature could have hit its yield point and permanently deformed. I mean, just a pile of gibberish. Ken Wheeler Award for that sentence. Gibberish. Just absolute fucking gibberish. Therefore, if gravity is the consequence of warping of space-time, well, that's Einstein's dopey theory, yes. The fabrics can be permanently deformed. Well, that's not his theory. Then a deformation could create a gravitational effect independent of mass. Says you, with no hard evidence, and I don't even think you have any limp, soft evidence. I don't think you have anything to defend that mush. Dark matter could be a microscopic black holes with no mass at the center. So it's concentrated mass, but there's no mass. So I don't even know who has the theory that black holes don't have any mass, because that's kind of retarded. The whole point is they're really dense mass. The Earth the size of a grapefruit kind of thing. No mass. I mean, this is just retarded. So they wouldn't lose their strength being Hawking radiation. Another pure invented phrase. Hawking radiation. It's not this, and it's not that, and it's not that, and it's not that. It's Hawking radiation. It's this special kind of blah that comes out of things. Blah is the blah blah, and the blah blah radiation is absorbed by absolutely nothing. We have no evidence that a Hawking radiation ever was absorbed by something and converted into any other kind of radiation. Can you convert Hawking radiation? Can you capture it in a reservoir and run turbines with it or something? What is this Hawking radiation? Oh, that's right. It's a pile of crap, made up crap. Prediction. Space-time's elastic properties hits the yield point, so only that part of the geodesic stretch marks would remain after inflation stops. So it's just gibberish, 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 gibberish. Why don't you say 0 point energy next, just for fun? These steep gravitational wells would not follow the inverse square law. They would be steep, tiny gravitational wells. So what? They'd be more than the inverse square law? If they're steep, they can't be less than the inverse square law. You're not getting it. The steepness of the well is exactly what causes the inverse square law. And as I stated, for photons, Einstein has already decided, that for photons, the well is very deep. But for everything else, not so much. All right. So what a pile of crap. But anyway, this comment didn't show up anywhere. It just all of a sudden pops into my spam folder a month after it was posted, which is bizarre. So I'll unspam it. But anyway, I never saw it. YouTube's comment section just sucks. I do have to post the email address. I have to make, Linux just doesn't let me do a plain image, which is just so annoying without borders. But it'd be nice just to have the email address bleed into this thing somewhere. I could just put it in the description, of course. I suppose I'll do that. That's the minimum I can do. But yeah, that's probably the better way to communicate if you have something important to say. ds@draftphysics.com. All right, so that's probably enough now. Now I've probably done more than an hour, so I feel better about that. Let's see, there's no other new comments, so we don't have to worry about it. Let's see, does Ken Wheeler subscribe to Huygens' principle? Well, he liked Huygens because Huygens is a wave guy, but Huygens. 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 So, but I don't recall him. He talks about interference. So he says that, the magnetic lines now, he says they're caused by interference. That's how bad this is. This disease of seeing interference patterns every time there's a line pattern, an on-off pattern. Everybody just goes, it's interference. It's interference. It's interference alert. Interference alert. I mean, stoplight turns on and off. Interference alert. Interference alert. I mean, it's just too fucking stupid. Every angular change that ever takes place is now interference. It's pathetic. So I don't know what to say. I mean, obviously, I can't recall Ken Wheeler talking about Huygens. In a elaborate way. He might have mentioned his name, but I don't recall him talking about the actual function of converting flat line force into bulged force that interferes with itself. I don't recall him saying anything about that specifically beyond attributing magnetic lines of force in the ferrocell to interference, which doesn't make any sense. But it doesn't make any sense that all these assholes think there's a bunch of stuff moving around magnets. There's no stuff moving around the magnet. The magnet is like a light bulb. It's rays of force. There's no going around the magnet. The field lines are just a representation of the strength of the force in terms of the ferro material lines up in the same orientation as the original magnet. So they're repelling. They're not attracting. The lines, the little bits, are lining up in the repulsive mood to the original magnet. They're creating a repulsive magnet, and therefore they have to have distance between each other because they're all repulsive. Each one of the lines is lined up the same way, and it's repulsive to each other. And it's the opposite of the original magnet. Sorry, it's the opposite of the original magnet. So each of the lines is the opposite of the original magnet. So if the original magnets head north-south, all the lines are south-north. So you can kind of understand they're attracted to the original magnet, but they're repelled from each other. That's why they're separated by a distance. No interference involved. God, you people just don't know shit. But there's no stuff moving through those lines. There's no stuff spinning in from going out the top and coming back through the bottom. Nothing's moving in the magnet. It's just a filter. And it makes electron pressure at one end and proton pressure at the other end. That's all it does. It just segregates a dirty force into all electron force at one end, all proton force at the other. That's all it does. No swirly bits, nothing. Oh, shit. I just hate you people. This is not rocket science. These are facts that just people shouldn't keep fucking up. Because there's a right-hand rule, because electrons cause voltage changes when you perturb them, and that change will always move in the direction of the north side of the magnet, then yes, there's an orientation to the rays. But that's all there is. There's just an orientation, a direction they're coming out at. You have the magnet this way, they're coming out this way. If the magnet turns around, you have them come out this way. That's why there's a right-left rule, because of how the magnet's going to end up pushing the force. But it has nothing to do with any kind of circular crap inside the magnet. Nothing's in the magnets going circular. Ugh, damn. There's no orbiting field. All right. So anyway, this is much more than an hour. So fuck the CPSW, whatever the fuck it is, the douchebags of the dissident douchebag society. Clearly, they're afraid of me. And that's all it is. They fear my logic. They fear my scrutiny. They fear my dissidence. I don't just go, oh, you're so wonderful to do all those cartoons and all the kid-friendly stuff because, you know, science is about giving away like free Barney the dinosaur so all the 5-year-olds will show up. Because, you know, science is for 5-year-olds. It's fun. I mean, this doesn't care who's the member of his club. He'll attract, you know, anybody. He'll give away cosmetics so maybe he can get some 13-year-old girls. I mean, it's just so fucking stupid. You know, the point is to raise the bar, not lower the bar. Raise the bar. Douche. Anyway. So, till the next time and such. I really think that's enough. No, but yeah, I'm a little bit pissed off that they wasted my Saturday morning. They could have sent me an email saying you're not welcome. Could have done that. Why waste my time and force me to show up into the room to kick me out? That was really bogus. An extra bogus. That just made their bogusness even more bogus. So anyway, fuckers. Period. End of sentence and all that shit. So till next time, you people suck. Other people suck even more, but yeah, that's the way it works. Let's see, because you're Bick and Strunk. I don't know what that even means, but yes, Gummo, we can live without you. Why do these people show up in these rooms? I mean, why do they do it? Why? It makes you wonder. You get 200 views on a video. I mean, are 10 of them rational people? 10? It's amazingly bad percentages on the internet. Anyway, kill them. I'm for voting to kill these people. Just letting you know, if we ever have an election and say, are we going to let's put out the trash? You know, let's put the real assholes in concentration camps, you know, not for dumb reasons, but for legitimate reasons. They're just too much asshole. Way too smelly for civilization. Yeah. Let's put them, you know, in ovens and shit. Okay. Till next time and such. Just saying, I'll vote for it. If somebody can write the bill, I'll vote for the put the trolls in a concentration camp and shove them in ovens. Eventually, final solution them in some way. Work them to death, and if they don't die, then beat them to death. And if they still don't die, then yeah, just throw them off a cliff. Fucking garbage. I mean, they can't do the minimums. Like make a rational argument. Fuck. God, I just hate people. Hate them. All right, so what do I want to do? I guess I just want to close the room. I'll do that, and then I'll fix up the rest and be done. So till next time and such.